Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Thanks for being patient with us, everybody, and thank you, Sap, for being patient with me as I was recovering from just a really nasty virus over the past couple of weeks. Had a fever, had a cough, had everything that you don't want to have, and now I'm finally feeling better. Though I just told Sap I still have a bit of a lingering cough, so excuse me if I cough on the show at any point, but feeling better. So now time to take my attentions from being sick to basketball, which has actually been, Sep, a nice comfort for me while I've been ailing, is watching plenty of basketball because there hasn't been too much else to do. And somebody who's probably not feeling great today is, and maybe their throat is even more sore than mine, is Rudy Gobert after he got chokehold held by, or maybe that's a full Nelson, by Draymond Green, who is now going to serve a 5-game suspension. Sap, that brawl happened between the Warriors and the Timberwolves while the score was 0-0 just at the start of the game.
Yeah, 3 players got ejected before basket was made. So people who don't think the NBA is as intense as it used to be maybe should have watched that game. But this is what Draymond Green does, right? And again, he's got so many priors that when he does something like this, he's going to get a suspension of 5 games. If this was someone else, maybe it would have been 2 games, but because it's Draymond Green, he gets a 5-game suspension. And again, he's just going in trying to protect Klay Thompson. And obviously, oftentimes, Draymond goes over the top, as he did on Tuesday night. But this is what endears him to his teammates for the most part and endears him to Warriors fans. He is the ultimate player that you love him when he's on your team and you despise him when he's not on your team. And that's what makes him, a key component to them winning 4 championships. Not the key component, obviously, is Steph Curry, Durant, Klay Thompson, Andre Iguodala won a finals MVP, but Draymond plays a role, and a lot of these dynastic teams always had a player that was an irritant, and certainly Draymond Green is that guy.
Yeah, and yes, he was protecting his guy, in Klay Thompson. But at the same time, there is a history between Draymond and Rudy Gobert. Honestly, there's a history between most players and Rudy Gobert. He's not the most popular player in the league. Most people blame him for the league shutting down because of COVID. He was sort of patient zero there. And I think Draymond takes exception to the fact that Gobert's won all these Defensive Player of the Year awards over him, when most people probably view Draymond as the better defender, on a historical basis. So I'm sure there's, a bit of a professional rivalry there too. But obviously, when he saw his opportunity, Sap, to put a chokehold on Rudy Gobert, he wasn't going to hesitate to do that.
No, it was like, a green light, go ahead, do what I got to do to protect Klay, but also get in a couple of shots in on Rudy Gobert. Like you said, there is that rivalry between the two. Gobert's not very popular. Draymond obviously is a guy that has issues with many of the players, but you make a great point. I'm sure Draymond looks at Rudy Gobert as kind of a fake tough guy or an overrated defender. And I think that Draymond's a better defender because he can do more. Like Rudy Gobert is not going to go out the 3-point territory and defend the 3-pointer. He's not as aggressive. He's not as versatile a defender as Draymond Green. So sure, Draymond Green, who looks at a slight on everything. I mean, again, this is a guy who was a 2nd-round pick and
Right.
was kind of an afterthought when he came in the league. He was kind of heavy, and it was a surprise he even was able to get his career going in Golden State. So yeah, it's not a surprise that he went after Gobert when the moment was there.
Yeah, and so Sap, 5 games based on his priors, not just priors in the league, but priors with Gobert too. Is 5 games too lenient? I almost thought it was going to be closer to 10.
Yeah, you could have went that far, if you wanted to go 10 games, and I don't think that would have been a shock. But I think at some point the league was like, okay, it's early in the season. It was part of the in-season tournament game on Tuesday night. So in some sense, I think the league looked at this as, again, it's never a good thing when someone has someone in a chokehold before a basket is even scored. But it shows that maybe the players and the organizations are taking the in-season tournament seriously. I mean,
Yeah.
Steph Curry didn't play in that game, but he was ill, maybe with the same type of thing that you had for a
Possible,
week. But it could be, right? But, we saw the Celtics involved in some games, and there seemed to be some intensity there. And that's a good thing for the league to see that the players are playing in this in-season tournament and they're playing hard. And that makes it more appealing for the league when we talk about October and November before we get to Christmas, because we've always said that the season really kicks off Christmas Day. Well, the
Right.
league wanted to make the first 2 months of the season more relevant, and the in-season tournament, which I know we're going to talk about in more detail, certainly has shown some of that so far in the early going.
Yeah, I mean, the games have been for the most part competitive. Adam Silver was actually on the Celtics broadcast the other night, Sap, as a lot of people are stopping by to wish Mike Gorman, the Celtics broadcaster, in his final year, happy trails and thank him for all of his work that he's done for the NBA and for the Celtics organization. He was, saying how the massively up the ratings are for those in-season tournament games, up 100%, up 50% on one night, on another. So yes, I think for the time being, it's captured some interest of the national audience, and the players are playing. They know, they're listen, as rich as they are, no one's going to scoff at an extra $500,000 in their pocket if they win the thing. So I think that they are motivated, and there's certainly bragging rights saying, I was on the first team to win the first ever in-season tournament. So I think that has something to play. But last thing I want to ask you, Sap, about the Draymond Green thing before we move on is part of, do you think, that fight with the Timberwolves frustration on where Draymond personally is at and where the Warriors are at? Timberwolves are sitting at 8-3. The Warriors are 6-6. Draymond's numbers are down across the board. Is some of it just frustration with how the early part of the season has gone, Sap, and maybe jealousy that the Timberwolves are sort of a team on the rise and the Warriors are maybe a team on decline?
As long as no one touched my man Anthony Edwards, I can buy into that. So we look at Golden State. They look like a middling team right now, as do the Lakers, but I wouldn't count either one out because they've got so much veteran star power. The thing about Golden State is Klay Thompson looks like he is cashed, right? I mean, Steph Curry is still phenomenal. Draymond Green, his numbers are down. The style of play that Draymond Green has exhibited over the last decade, that doesn't translate to a long career. I mean, he's a undersized defender. Draymond Green is maybe 6'5", 6'6", plays a lot in the low post. He has to defend different big men from, Nikola Jokic to Joel Embiid to Giannis. I mean, guys that are physically bigger and stronger than him, and he's always done a fantastic job. So, yeah, I don't think the Warriors are going to be necessarily a factor in the Western Conference. They may win a round because of their experience like they did a year ago, but I can't see them really going much farther than that. So there may be some frustration there. And Minnesota's kind of the hot new team in the league, right? As expected, especially from me, and I know you were on board with that when we did our preview a few weeks ago. Minnesota's 8-3, like you said, Jed. They have wins over the Celtics, Denver, and now Golden State. Denver and the Celtics only have 2 losses each. Half of their losses came against Minnesota. So Minnesota's for real. And, maybe teams are getting turned off by them, that may be getting a little bit cocky. But, they're playing up to the role of more than just a spoiler. Minnesota Timberwolves, I mean, I could see them maybe even making it to the Western Conference Finals because the Lakers and Golden State and the Clippers have underperformed so far. And maybe Minnesota's the second best team in the Western Conference behind only Denver. You also have Phoenix to obviously follow and see what they can do. But yeah, there could be some frustration on the part of the Golden State Warriors because, the dynasty appears to be ending at this point. I don't want to sound like Trent Dilfer in 2014 when he,
Right.
said the Patriots dynasty was over. But I think that Golden State really is going to have a long, difficult season because they've played a lot of games in the postseason. They're older, and it's difficult to keep that up for as long as they have.
Yeah, Klay Thompson, you mentioned, Sap, lowest points per game since his rookie year, and his lowest 3-point percentage thus far ever in his career,
Mhm.
shooting 34% from three. So yeah, he certainly looks like he's a player who's nearing the end. I mean, he's still averaging over 14 points a game, which is not bad by any means, but he's not usually, he's doing it in an incredibly efficient way. He's doing it in a far less efficient way than in years past. When he was a 20-point a game scorer. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. I know he's also frustrated with his contract status. So Golden State certainly has sort of the recipe for a team that could potentially implode. And Draymond Green is always somebody that, isn't necessarily going to help that situation. He's always a powder keg. And so that's a team to keep an eye on, as are the Timberwolves staff. Like you said, the Timberwolves sort of raising through the ranks of the conference, and maybe in the NBA. And it is interesting, Sav, if you take a look at what the early returns in the NBA, some of the teams that have been very impressive are teams that we haven't really talked about in the past couple of years, like Minnesota, like the Houston Rockets, like the Indiana Pacers, Sap. I mean, those teams are all playing really, really good basketball and not really teams that are traditionally, in the mix.
Indiana to me is the biggest surprise, right? 7-4, and we saw them against the Celtics a couple of weeks ago, and the Celtics beat them by 50 plus. So they look like the worst team in basketball. Now, Tyrese Halliburton didn't play that night; he's their best player. But I thought Indiana was going to be in contention for the worst team in the Eastern Conference, and they may yet be. Remember last year, Utah got off to a really great
Yep,
start, and
still
then they
very
started
early,
to
sure.
falter. It is early, and the same thing with teams that are struggling a little bit. And Milwaukee's also 7-4, but it's different than Indiana. Indiana's been an incredible surprise. Milwaukee doesn't quite look right at 7-4, but I think they'll be just fine. But Indiana's been a massive surprise in the Eastern Conference. I think from a negative standpoint, Cleveland just doesn't seem to be able to get it right.
Yeah, it's been bad.
I think they're going to be better than that at some point, but maybe they're going to make a coaching change as we get closer to Christmas if they continue to play below 500. Out west, Oklahoma City's been a nice surprise, but you were right on that. You were high on them anyway. You picked them to make the postseason. Houston, Ime Udoka can coach, and he can get these young guys to buy in on defense. That's the big thing. If you play defense in the NBA on a night-to-night basis, you will steal some wins, and that's what Houston's been able to do. Well, and they beat Denver. They beat Denver, which is, that's pretty impressive.
Sap, they're currently riding a 6-game winning streak.
Yeah.
The Houston Rockets. They beat the Kings twice in a row, who were a playoff team last year. They beat the Lakers. They beat the Pelicans, and they beat the Nuggets. Pretty nice teams that they've beaten there. Not pushovers. And what Houston did was in the offseason, they made two big signings. My guy Dylan Brooks from Oregon. They took him away from the Grizzlies, and they signed Fred VanVleet away from the Toronto Raptors. And those are two guys with massive chips on their shoulders. Fred VanVleet, undrafted. Dylan Brooks, that's just how he plays, with a massive chip on his shoulder, not a high draft pick. And I think that sort of is the kind of guys that Udoka wanted to get in there to sort of be tone setters. They have a lot of young guys on their team because they've been bad for a while, and they've been high up in the lottery and drafting guys like Draymond Green and Jabari Smith. And so they are now translating those young guys into saying, okay, well, this is how, seasoned professionals play, and guys who have made the playoffs before. And in the case of Fred VanVleet, a guy who's won a championship before. And I think that those additions have helped the team tremendously mature at a much more rapid pace than people were expecting. And they've had guys like Sengun, the Turkish player, really emerge this year. He's averaging 19 points a game. Jalen Green's taking a step up. He's averaging 19 points a game too. And so I think right now, if the season ended today, which again, it's a long, long way from ending, how could anybody besides Ime Udoka get Coach of the Year?
Yeah, I mean, went to what was arguably the worst team in basketball last year, and he has them in contention in the early going, building culture. And again, when you make those free agent signings, you're bringing in more than just productive basketball players. You're bringing in players that have that massive chip on their shoulders. VanVleet is a champion. Brooks is a guy who, if you can keep him focused, because he has a tendency of getting off the rails at some point and doing crazy things and getting suspensions and whatever. But if you can keep him focused, he's a really nice player. So,
like Draymond in that way.
Same exact type of player. Absolutely. Those guys are great on your team. You kind of need that. They're the bouncer in the club. They protect the superstars, and they can do a lot of really good things, but they've got to be
think they're
focused.
A little bit better than they actually are.
Sure. Yep. They just play with that edge, which is just fine. But again, Ime Udoka, we saw in his 1 year in Boston, the man can coach. And he learned from Greg Popovich. And Popovich, unlike Belichick, Popovich's tree is pretty good. He's had a lot of assistants that have gone on to have success, and Ime Udoka looks like yet another.
Yeah. And so obviously those teams have been nice surprises, but the two teams that have been the most impressive this season, Sep, are the two teams everybody was expecting to be the most impressive of the season. You mentioned them earlier, the Celtics at 9-2 and the defending champion Denver Nuggets at 9-2. Both teams look tremendous. And the Celtics coming off of a win last night against the Philadelphia 76ers team, and the Celtics didn't have Porzingis or Jaylen Brown, and they won in Philadelphia, avenging their loss from earlier in the season. So that was a big win for the Celtics. And the Nuggets basically, Sap, look like they've stepped up right where they left off at the end of last season, winning a championship. They had a big showdown the other week against the Dallas Mavericks, who started off pretty good. They beat them. They've beaten the Warriors already. They've beaten the Lakers. So, the Nuggets are playing at a really high level, though they're going to be without their second best player, Jamal Murray, who seemingly always hurt, Sap. And they just happened to get him a healthy run in the playoffs last year. But injuries are certainly a concern with Murray, but they don't really seem to miss too much with him because they're used to playing without him.
Right. And they have the best player in the world, right? Like, I don't think there's any discussion right now who is the best player in the world. It's Nikola Jokic, without question. I mean, he just picked up where he left off in the postseason. He dominated the postseason last year. And it appears to me, Jet, that he starts every game with 10.5 rebounds and 5 assists before.
Yeah, they just give it to him. Yeah, they pencil it in.
It's just there. Like, how many times are you hearing highlights? Okay, right now Denver leads by 17 in the third quarter. Nikola Jokic has 24 points, 11 rebounds, and 8 assists, and we're only midway through the third quarter. It's like, holy crap, this guy is incredible. He's the best player in the world. And the way
he's getting better.
He's getting better, right? I mean, it's just like the thing he does, which the greats in any sport do, whether, Gretzky or Lemieux in hockey and, Magic, Bird, LeBron in basketball. I don't use Jordan and Kobe because they were different, right? They were scorers, assassins, just, sociopaths, to be quite honest with you. But in terms of playmakers, they really slow the game down. The game is moving at a snail's pace for Nikola Jokic. Oftentimes it looks like he's moving at a snail's pace, but he sees things happen before they happen. I mean, how many times do we see him make a pass to a spot where there's no one there, and then all of a sudden there's someone there for a layup, whether it's, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Jamal Murray when he's healthy. He's just such a phenomenal passer, and then he controls the boards, scores when he wants to, incredibly efficient. No, he's the best player in the world right now. I don't think there's really a discussion. I don't think he's separated himself from the rest of the league the way, say, LeBron did for 12 years or the way Jordan did for 10 years. Those guys were like, because at the defensive end, when they were phenomenal as well, they were just great athletes that could dominate all 94 feet.
But he's seemingly widening it, Sap. I thought at the beginning of last season, up until the Nuggets won the finals, we both thought Giannis was the best player in the world, and I still think he's probably the second best player. But Jokic, Sap, based again just 11 games into the season, so very, very early. But his 2 MVP seasons, Sap, he's averaging more points, more rebounds, and more assists per game than those 2 MVP seasons. I mean, that's crazy. And those were, dominant statistical seasons. So he's getting better. He's not just saying, I won finals MVP last year, I won my first championship. I just want to go focus on, my horses in Serbia. He's getting better. He's playing better basketball than he ever has before, which is scary. And no one has any answer for him because he's such a unique player. There's no effective way to guard him because he's such a gifted passer. If you double team him, you're giving up a basket. And if you single cover him, he can score from wherever on the floor.
And he's so big. I mean, not just in terms of height. He's so wide. He's like country strong. Like, he doesn't have the physique of Dwight Howard or, any of those imposing type guys. I mean, he looks like a dad out there playing with his kids, but he's kind of got this big butt, wide hips, kind of skinny arms. He doesn't look the part of the best player in the world, but, he creates so much space for himself. It's really fascinating to watch. And the thing is, he won back-to-back MVPs, finished second last year. I think if they could have revoted, they would have given him the MVP over Embiid last year. And he's clearly the favorite to win it this year. I mean, you could be talking about a guy who would be looking at 4 consecutive MVPs, which is never happened, because it was Wilt and Russell dominating in the late 50s through the 60s. And then, obviously Bird won 3 in a row. Jordan never won 3 in a row. LeBron never won 3 in a row. LeBron should have won 5 in a row. He won 2. Then Derrick Rose won 1. Then he won 2 more. He should have won 5 straight MVPs, but that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, this guy is just playing at such a high level. And look, both the Celtics and Denver are headed for 60-win seasons if they so choose to do that. Again, as you get closer to the playoffs, you'll see some load management, and you want to have those guys healthy for the postseason. But they clearly look like the 2 best teams. One's the defending champ, and one has the best roster. So let's get at it. They look like the 2 best teams without question.
And, the other guy who might be behind Jokic if you're voting for MVP today would be Jason Tatum, who leads the league in plus minus, if you care about that statistic, by just a whopping margin, Sap. He's a plus minus in his games played by plus 181. The next closest is his teammate Drew Holiday at plus 151, and then Jokic is a plus 139. So the Celtics with Jason Tatum on the court are plus 181 points, which is just a massive difference. They're also a negative when he's off the court, Sap, just to show you how effective Jason Tatum has been early going. And that's somebody who's not necessarily a quick starter, but he's gotten off to a really nice start this season, Sap, which has helped carry the Celtics to this 9-2 record early going. So Tatum's been really impressive. Porzingis has fit in seamlessly. Drew Holiday has been filled that gap left by Marcus Smart. The guy who's been a little inconsistent has been Jaylen Brown, who I think is still trying to figure out what his role is, because he's not his role last year was every night I'm the number 2 option. Occasionally when Tatum's off, I'm the number 1 option. It's a little different now because you have Porzingis and you have Holiday, both guys who are capable scorers too. And I don't think Brown necessarily knows what his role is every game. Some games he's been terrific, and other games he's been absent.
It could also be the pressure of signing that huge contract, which doesn't go into effect till next year, but there's still pressure there when you sign a contract that makes you the highest paid player in the history of the sport. Like, that won't last for long, because the next contract that gets signed in the offseason, probably Jason Tatum's contract, when he resigns in the offseason, he'll become the highest paid player, not only on the Celtics, but in the NBA. And we'll just be moving up the ladder with each and every year with every great player that gets that contract. But there could be that as well. And again, just trying to figure out, there's nights Porzingis is the number 2 guy. Heck, there's nights Drew Holiday or Derek White can be the number 2 guy. Sure. They are so fortunate to have that backcourt. Those 2 guys are so great. Total
so
pros.
Steady.
They play great
steady.
defense. Exactly. I mean, I've compared for years. Derek White's just an outstanding player, but to me, Drew Holiday is the closest thing we've seen to Dennis Johnson, and that is a massive compliment. Believe me, Dennis Johnson was one of my favorite players, and Larry Bird said the best player he ever had the privilege of playing with. That's high compliment from Larry Bird. He just does everything. There'll be games he'll score 14 or 16, but he's going to also get 9, 10 rebounds. He does everything on the court, plays great defense, and he's just a total pro. I think Tatum's game is really elevated, and I'm going to, maybe irritate you with this. I think the fact that Marcus Smart and Grant Williams are gone is making him so much at ease with himself.
I was on board with it, Sap. I finally come to peace with it after the Celtics lost in that Game 7 stinker to the Heat. I said on the show, and I pinned it as my tweet, they need a culture change, and they needed different voices in the locker room. And, I hate it's going to be, if the Celtics win the championship, it's a bummer that Marcus Smart isn't going to be part of that, because he was just such a great representative for the city of Boston and for the Celtics organization. But you've got to, if you're running a team, value winning more than sentimentality, and exactly. I think that's what Brad Stevens was able to do. This is just a better roster than what they've had before, Sap. They have way more ways to beat you. And is their bench, absolutely their bench is thin, without a doubt. But you take that when you consider how good the starters are, and when you consider at the trade deadline, you can address the bench. They have plenty of second-round picks, first-round picks, whatever. If they need to get somebody who plays a specific role off the bench, they can get them. They're not looking to trade at the trade deadline for a superstar. They don't need that.
Denver won a championship last year with 7 players. And again, when you look at the postseason, especially the first round of the NBA playoffs, generally a 7-game series is like 17 days long. And hopefully you take care of business in that first round. So the first round feels like such a comfortable position to be in. The second and third rounds, it's more of like every other day. Once you get to the finals, it's spread out again, 7 games in 17 days. So it's not like this heightened
fatigue, right?
Exactly. That's a perfect word to use, Jed. It's just not this heightened like every other day for 2 straight months. I mean, the first round and the final are spread out to the point where I think the teams can kind of catch their breath and be more productive. So, yeah, I think they need one more bench piece, maybe a big, and also just have to hope that Porzingis stays healthy. And, Horford can pick his spots like he did the other night against Philadelphia. He was outstanding in that game.
Outstanding.
They needed him. Yeah. They needed him. And he does play well against Joel Embiid. Now, it kind of will impact him going forward. I think what happened was last year, he put so much energy into defending Embiid in the second round of the playoffs that he had nothing left for the Eastern Conference Finals. He was horrible in that series against Miami.
Yeah, awful.
But
awful. Yeah.
One more piece, I think they'll just be fine. I just think now Jason Tatum feels like, okay, this is my team. I don't have Marcus Smart. I don't have Grant Williams. I don't have Malcolm Brogdon, who, were constantly opining about everything about the team. Marcus Smart criticizing the coach, Malcolm Brogdon criticizing the coach, Grant Williams just irritating everyone. Jason Tatum's probably, I think Jason Tatum's a guy who's best served and more productive when he's just kind of himself, which is
Less
the chill
distracted,
dude.
yeah.
Right. He just go out and play. You don't have to, get too fired up for the most part. He's so damn talented that he can just go play, and that's what he's doing. Jaylen Brown will be better. I think there's some pressure with the contract and just adapting to having a legitimate third scorer and Kristaps Porzingis. They haven't had that before. Whether it was Brogdon or Smart or whoever else, those guys were good players, but Porzingis is a guy who can go out and get you 30 any given night.
Yeah, and he's you can tell he's in like basketball nirvana. Porzingis, he said it himself. He's much more comfortable being a third or a fourth option than a first or a second option. Which on this team he does not have to worry about being a first or a second option. That's taken care of. And with the Celtics need him to a game be the guy who's scoring 30 points. If he doesn't have to do it every night, he's plenty comfortable doing it. Occasionally. So yeah, it's been great. So things are great in Boston, Sap. They're great in Denver. They're great in some other cities. Things that it's not so great for is the secondary team in Los Angeles, the Clippers, Sap, who have lost 6 straight games.
I thought you were going to say the Chargers.
No,
the Chargers and the
Clippers
are the same thing, aren't they?
Right. It's not great for the Chargers either.
Bill Belichick's next destination.
Ooh, that's a hot take. I think the Commanders, but that's a talk for another day.
I tweeted out a column I wrote 3 years ago saying Belichick's next stop would be the Chargers. I also had a column, 7 years ago that Belichick should quit after they beat Seattle in the Super Bowl. So you want to listen to me on these things for sure.
You do, for sure. Yeah, that was good. That was a good take, Sep. He only won two more Super Bowls after that.
Right.
And went to another. But yeah, in LA for the Clippers, not going well. 6 losses in a row. And that's after the trade for James Harden that, seemed inevitable because the Sixers and Harden just, he was saying he'd never play for Daryl Morey again. The Clippers were leaving him on the Sixers leaving him on the tarmac at the airport. It was just an ugly breakup, as it always pretty much is with James Harden. In case you didn't know, the details of the trade were PJ Tucker, Marcus Morris, Robert Covington, Nick Batum, KJ Martin, a 2028 unprotected first-round pick, 2 second-round picks, and a 2029 pick swap, and a pick from the Thunder. So a lot of picks. Those all went to the 76ers, so they're loaded with picks. Got a couple of useful veterans in Covington, Batum, and Morris. Sorry, PJ Tucker went also to the Clippers. My fault. Morris, Covington, Batum, and the picks went to the Sixers. And, the Clippers were all excited, had, big introductory conference for James Harden, as they have their version of a big 3 or a big 4, if you want to include Russell Westbrook with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And it just so far hasn't worked. I don't think that James Harden really endeared himself to anybody with his opening press conference saying that, he was on a leash in Philadelphia and that he's not a system player. He is the system. So it just hasn't gone well. He's insisting it's going to be great once they figure it all out. It seems like Russell Westbrook just can't get rid of this guy, Sap. Everywhere he goes, James Harden just, they end up together. I like, just 2 magnets that can't seem to get rid of each other. This is their 3rd team that they've been on together, which is that's a very strange coincidence. They've been on the Thunder, the Rockets, and now the Clippers together. But Sap, is this a trade that is going to pay dividends for either team? Is it addition by subtraction for the Sixers? Can the Clippers figure it out with James Harden?
It has to work for Philadelphia, and it has so far, because now you see Tyrese Maxey as Philadelphia's second best player. He's elevated to become what will certainly be an all-star this year. He's an outstanding player. We're both big fans of Tyrese Maxey. I think in the
fastest player in the league, I think, Sap. I think
it's either him or De'Aaron Fox, right?
Yeah.
I think from baseline to baseline, John Wall used to be that guy before all the knee injuries. I think he could get from one end of the court to the next end of the court in like 2 seconds. It was pretty impressive. Giannis does that pretty well, but he just takes giant steps.
Yeah.
But in the perfect world, Maxey's a third. So maybe Philadelphia can try to get a second with some of these picks that they have, to try to support Joel Embiid. I don't expect the Sixers to continue playing at the pace they have played so far, but it's been a surprise in Philadelphia. They still have Joel Embiid, one of the 5 best players in the world, and that's
So
being
do you think
conservative.
a little
But
addition by subtraction, Sap, with them, and that
without
Harden was
question,
holding
he's
Maxey back?
he's a pain in the ass. I mean, look, the guy is not dependable. Just look at his playoff performance a year ago against the Celtics. He had 2 phenomenal games, like all-time great games, another solid game, and then 4 stinkers. Like, what are you going to do with that? If he's your second best player or your best player, you're not going to win with that. So yeah, addition by subtraction. You pick up some veterans that can Covington and Morris and Batum. I mean, I didn't even know Batum was still even in the league.
No, God,
But
he's had a long career. Good for
he's
him.
he's ancient. But yeah, these are guys that will understand their roles and do some nice things in Philadelphia. If they can add one more piece, maybe they can contend in the Eastern Conference. It's a mess with the Clippers though, because if you're Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, you probably look at each other and go, okay, so now we have to just stand by and watch James Harden dribble for 15 seconds. And Russell Westbrook does pretty much the same thing. You have these incredibly dominant guards in Westbrook and Harden, and the 2 best players on the team still are Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. So how is that going to work? I mean, God bless Ty
Well, it
Lue. I
hasn't
mean,
so
this is a
far,
headache,
Sap.
right?
It has
I
not
don't think it's
worked.
going to work. It's not going to work. And we know Kawhi might check out at some point. Maybe a myriad of injuries, and he and Paul George haven't been the most durable, dependable guys since they got there in 2019. So this has a chance to really be bad for the Clippers. And James Harden's just a guy now. Instead of the beard, he should be known as the cooler. And like, as the superstitious person, I would shave the beard, like, just for a fresh
At this
start. But
point, yeah.
obviously, he's obviously got a massive ego. He's not going to do that, and it's kind of part of his brand. So no, I
Yeah,
can't
like
see this
Anthony
working.
Davis as the
The
unibrow as
brow,
part of his
yeah,
brand. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
LeBron's got the bald spot that he keeps covering up. So yeah,
yeah. Sap, here's my sort of thought process on James Harden. I thought I think he's the announcer, maybe the play-by-play guy for the Mavericks.
I heard
That
this.
clip
Yeah,
went viral. I think he nailed it. He had a perfect, saying you got to look in the mirror, James Harden, because everybody. And if you've listened to a single show of ours, or you've watched my Twitter for any period of time, Kyrie Irving's my least favorite player in the league, probably my least favorite athlete on planet Earth. But I do think that the same energy that people give in terms of Kyrie Irving being a team killer is just as equally deserved for James Harden being a team killer. If you look at all these places he's went, the team he's left just like embers in his wake, Sap. I mean, it's been just like Sherman's march through different teams that he's destroyed all these different franchises, Sap, because he is never happy and he always blames everybody but himself. And then they have to take a trade where they made a trade for him where they paid a lot. And then when they're trading him out of town, they're getting 50 cents on the dollar. And so Houston really suffered when they traded him. Although
Houston stole him from OKC.
They
I mean, they
did.
really didn't give up much to get him.
In OKC, it took them a long time to recover. But then Houston, after they traded him, he left like nothing there in his wake. And then the Nets, it didn't work out with him there. But when they traded him to the Sixers, they got back Ben Simmons, who's played in like 8 games total, so really nothing there. And the Sixers have to give him up, like you said, for someone who's maybe 100 years old in Nick Batum, some nice veterans, some picks that aren't going to convey, for a long time. And ultimately, how can you look at something that happens over and over again and say come to any other conclusion than it's James Harden?
Yeah, no, without question. I mean, you echoed pretty much everything what that gentleman in Dallas said, and you're both 100% correct. I mean, he just goes to a place, the place gets worse. He doesn't perform in the postseason. He never takes responsibility for his shortcomings, and he's a coach killer, a GM killer. He's going to end his career. He's a certain Hall of Famer. The numbers are spectacular. I've said this. You can count on one hand players I've seen who are both great scorers and facilitators, and he happens to be one of them. But in the end, it hasn't translated to winning. And he also it's just a bad look that, every place he goes, he kind of plays himself out of shape, demands a trade. It gets very contentious, and then the team moves him, and then you see what happens with the next team he goes to. And they've lost 6 in a row, and they have 4 future Hall of Famers playing on the same team, and it's just not working.
No, and I don't see how it's going to turn around. I never understood why the Clippers were the team that was so desperate for James Harden. The fit didn't ever really make sense to me. I think they needed more guys, bigger guys to protect their wing players. But That's the way they wanted to do it, and so far it's only resulted in losing. I believe Sap, they're still looking for their first win with James Harden.
Right. Yeah. Not
So
won a game yet with Harden on the team.
so not good. Not good for James Harden or for the Clippers. But Sap, we got about 3 minutes left. So before we wrap up, I have, what are your thoughts on how the in-season tournament's been so far? We talked about briefly, but competitiveness, you said. What about the courts, Sap? You've been growing up watching traditional courts. Do you like it, or is it too much of an eyesore for you?
Some of them are good, some of them are bad. But again, this tournament is not for certainly a 60-year-old guy. It may be even not for someone your age, 35 years old. It may be for teenagers, right, who are now starting to follow the game on social
Yeah,
media.
that's true.
They consume things differently, so the new uniforms, the new courts are there for them. So I'm fine with that. Here's one takeaway I have, and I think it's worked so far because we've seen competitive games, and the $500,000 prize per player also goes to the coaches, I believe,
It
and
does.
the
It does.
low end players. So they're going to want that. But you've got to give something to the team that wins this. And my solution to that would be the team that wins the in season tournament gets a lottery pick. Now it would be the lottery pick with the least chance of being first overall. So essentially, it would be the 15th pick in the first round. So your first round would be 31 selections. The second round would be 30 selections. Give the winning team something along those lines. And of course, most teams would probably trade that draft pick as soon as the draft lottery came out. But that would be something to give the team even more incentive to try to win. Give them a lottery pick with only the longest odds to win the lottery. So essentially, it would be the 15th pick in the first round, unless they got lucky and moved into the top three.
I like the idea of rewarding the teams with that. My only concern would be that the players would say, "Why are we trying to help our team get a lottery pick for somebody who might take my job?" There's only X amount of roster
True.
spots. So that could be an issue
Well, I
with
don't think
players.
Steph Curry or LeBron or Kevin Durant would be too concerned with that.
What about if they award the team one win already in the first round of the playoffs? Is that anything for you, Sap, or does that not give you anything?
I always scoff at that stuff. They've talked about that in baseball, like, to make the Dodgers maybe advance than they usually do, is like give
Right.
them a 2-0 lead in the
Right.
divisional round because they can't seem to break through with all that talent. But something, give them something, and it doesn't have to be monetary. There's billions of dollars being exchanged in the league. Give them something that would give them some incentive. But I think the teams look like they want to play in this thing. And again, the lower end players and the coaches are going to be all in because $500,000 to those guys is a lot of money. It's a lot of money
Yeah.
to anyone.
It can't be a buy, right? That's too much.
Right. No, I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't go there.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think they're gonna, every year this goes on, they're gonna continue to tweak it, right? It's not gonna be the exact same format. I saw Adam Silver was saying like he doesn't know next year if they're gonna do the courts again. It's an experiment. Right. The whole thing is an experiment. It's bold. I give the NBA credit for that. For year one, I was expecting all the numbers to be up because there's a curiosity. I think the real test will be next year to see if people are still paying attention to it at the rate they are paying attention to it now, because it's a novelty this year. So that's going to do it for us. We're going to be back next week talking about plenty of stuff. There's new rumor on the streets about Zach LaVine potentially getting moved, and the Bulls blowing it up, moving on from LaVine, moving on to DeMar DeRozan. So some teams are certainly going to be interested in those players, namely contending teams like the Heat, the Sixers, maybe the Lakers, Sap. So lots to talk about there. And there will be plenty of other storylines. We'll see how the Warriors play without Draymond Green. And lots to talk about. Thanks for listening. Check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer, and we'll be back. Thanks to Full Press Coverage. Check out their website and talk to you guys next week. See you, everybody.